The bolt snapped cleanly in Maya's hand, and she understood immediately that she had just destroyed her last chance. She stood in the cavernous machine shed of Bridgewater Farms, holding the broken piece of metal like evidence of her own inadequacy. The smell of diesel fuel and old grease hung thick in the October air. Behind her, she could hear the footsteps of Robert Bridgewater approaching across the concrete floor, his expensive boots echoing in the silence. She didn't turn around. She couldn't bear to see the satisfaction on his face. "Problem?" His voice carried that particular tone wealthy men use when they already know the answer. Maya set the bolt on the workbench with deliberate care, her hands steadier than her heart. She was 34 years old, a mechanical engineer with 8 years of experience at Caterpillar before the layoffs, and she had traveled 400 miles from Detroit to this Iowa farm because her sister's medical bills were crushing them both. The job posting had said agricultural equipment specialist needed, competitive salary, housing included. What it hadn't mentioned was that Robert Bridgewater hired people the way some men collected hunting trophies. "The bolt sheared," she said, keeping her voice level. "The threads were already compromised. Anyone could have broken it. But you're the one who did." Robert circled around to face her. He was 56, tanned in a way that came from golf courses rather than fields, with silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He owned 11,000 acres of prime Iowa farmland, 3 grain elevators, and a reputation for getting exactly what he wanted. "That's the third mistake this week, Maya. The hydraulic line on Monday, the electrical short on Wednesday, and now this." Maya forced herself to meet his gaze. She needed this job. Sarah's chemotherapy cost $14,000 per cycle, and their insurance had found creative ways to deny most of the claims. Maya had already sold her car, emptied her 401k, and borrowed against everything she owned. This position paid $68,000 a year plus housing, nearly double what she could find anywhere else without relocating Sarah. "I can fix it," she said. Robert's smile widened. "Of course you can. You've got impressive credentials, MIT undergraduate, masters from Georgia Tech. Very impressive. On paper." He turned and walked toward the far end of the shed, where a massive John Deere 9620R sat partially disassembled. "Come here. I want to show you something." Maya followed, her work boots leaving prints in the dust that coated parts of the floor. The shed held a fortune in equipment, most of it pristine, some of it clearly neglected. The farm employed over 50 people during harvest season, but Robert ran through mechanics the way other farms went through machinery. The tractor was a beast, nearly 20 feet long and worth close to $500,000. Someone had been working on it and stopped, leaving tools scattered around it like a surgeon had abandoned an operation mid-procedure. "This is my problem, child," Robert said, running his hand along the fender with something like affection. "Bought it at auction 6 months ago. Great price because it has issues. Engine runs rough, transmission slips, electronics are glitchy. I've had 3 mechanics look at it, including one who supposedly worked for Deere Corporate. None of them could fix it. It just sits here useless while I pay lease on rental equipment." He turned to face her, and his expression shifted into something harder. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to fix this tractor. You have until the end of harvest season, which gives you exactly 3 weeks. If you succeed, you keep your job, you get a $20,000 bonus, and you become my head of equipment maintenance for all my operations. If you fail, you're done here." Maya felt the trap closing around her. "That's not what we agreed to. My contract—" "Your contract has a 90-day probationary period," Robert interrupted, "and we're in day 73. I can terminate you for any reason during probation, or you can take this challenge and prove you're worth what I'm paying you." He gestured at the tractor. "1 machine, 3 weeks. Either you're as good as your credentials say you are, or you're not." She wanted to walk away. Every instinct told her this was a setup, that he had deliberately maneuvered her into this position. But she thought of Sarah in the hospital bed, her sister's thin arms, and the bruises from the IV ports, the way she tried to smile when Maya visited, even though the pain made her grey. "What's really wrong with it?" Maya asked. "If I knew that, I wouldn't need you." Robert checked his watch, an Omega that probably cost more than most people's cars. "I have a conference call. The diagnostic equipment is in the office, keys are on the board, and you have access to anything in the shed. The parts budget is unlimited, as long as you can justify the expense." He started walking toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Maya, don't bother trying to call in outside help. I'll know. This is your test, not theirs." The door closed behind him with a hollow boom that echoed through the vast space. Maya stood alone in the machine shed with 10,000 square feet of equipment and one impossible task. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like ash. Somewhere outside, she could hear the sounds of the farm in motion, the rumble of combines in distant fields, the mechanical hiss of grain dryers, the voices of workers she barely knew calling to each other in Spanish and English. She walked slowly around the tractor, examining it from every angle. It was filthy, caked with mud and crop residue, the kind of filth that accumulates when equipment sits idle. Someone had started washing it and given up. The hood was unlatched, propped open to reveal the engine compartment. Inside, she could see disconnected hoses, removed sensors, and the general chaos of an incomplete repair. Maya opened the cab door and climbed up into the seat. The interior smelled of old sweat and stale coffee. The key was in the ignition. She turned it to the accessory position, and the dashboard lit up with a constellation of warning lights. Check engine, low pressure, system fault, transmission error. It was like the machine was screaming in every language it knew. She turned the key all the way, and the engine groaned to life. It ran, but badly, coughing and stuttering like a heavy smoker. The whole cab vibrated with an uneven rhythm. She let it idle for 30 seconds, listening to the sounds it made, feeling the vibrations through the seat, watching the needles on the gauges dance and spike. Then she shut it down. The silence that followed felt weighted with judgment. Maya climbed down and retrieved her phone from her jacket. She opened the note-taking app and began typing. Initial assessment, multiple cascading failures, engine timing issues, possible fuel system contamination, transmission likely mechanical rather than electronic. Despite error codes, electrical system shows phantom faults suggesting grounding problems. She knew what this was. She had seen it before in industrial equipment. This wasn't one dramatic failure. It was a dozen small problems that had compounded until the machine became impossible to diagnose using standard methods. Each mechanic before her had probably fixed one issue only to have another emerge, like playing whack-a-mole with a machine that fought back. The smart move would be to walk away, take the termination, go back to Detroit, find something else. But there was nothing else that paid enough. She had already called every contact she had, applied to every position within 200 miles of Sarah's hospital. This was it. Maya set her phone aside and walked to the rolling toolbox against the wall. She opened the drawers one by one, inventorying what was available. Good tools, quality equipment, everything she would need if this were a normal repair, but this wasn't normal. This was designed to make her fail. She thought about Robert's smile, the way he had said on paper, the casual cruelty of a man who had never needed anything from anyone. She thought about the 3 mechanics before her, probably all men who had failed this same test. She wondered if they had been offered the same deal, or if this particular humiliation was reserved for her because she was a woman who had dared to walk into his world, claiming expertise. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "How's the first day? Bet you're already running the place. Love you, sis." Maya closed her eyes and took a long breath. When she opened them, she was looking at the tractor again, really looking at it. Not as an impossible task, but as a puzzle. A solvable puzzle. She pulled out her laptop and connected it to the farm's Wi-Fi. If she was going to do this, she needed to start from scratch. Complete documentation, methodical diagnosis, elimination of variables one at a time. No assumptions, no shortcuts, no ego. The afternoon faded into evening while she worked, pulling up technical specifications, downloading diagnostic software, creating spreadsheets to track every system and subsystem. The other workers left for the day, their trucks and cars crunching across the gravel parking area. The automatic lights flickered on as darkness fell, harsh fluorescent white that turned everything stark and clinical. At 9 p.m., Maya finally stopped and stood up from her improvised desk on the workbench. Her back ached and her eyes burned, but she had a plan. It would take every hour of the next 3 weeks, require skills she hadn't used since graduate school, and demand a level of precision that left no room for error. She walked back to the small apartment above the machinery office that had come with the job. It was sparse but clean. A bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and living area that looked out over the darkened fields. She made instant ramen because it was fast, and she was too tired to care about taste. While she ate, she pulled up her bank account on her phone. $412. Sarah's next treatment was in 6 days. The hospital had agreed to a payment plan, but Maya was already behind. If she lost this job, they would both be destroyed. She set the phone face down on the table and finished her ramen in silence. Outside, the Iowa night was vast and dark, broken only by the distant lights of the main farmhouse where Robert Bridgewater probably sat in a room worth more than everything Maya owned. Already certain of how this would end, she thought about MIT, about the professors who had told her she had a gift for seeing systems as wholes rather than parts. She thought about her years at Caterpillar, the massive engines she had helped design, the problems she had solved when others said they were impossible. And she thought about Robert's smile and the way he had said, "on paper," and she felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "We'll see," she said to the empty room. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The first week disappeared into a blur of grease and frustration. Maya arrived at the machine shed each morning at 5:30, before the rest of the crew, when the air still carried the chill of autumn nights, and her breath misted in the fluorescent light. She left after dark, usually around 10 or 11, her hands torn and blackened despite the gloves, her body aching from contorting into impossible positions inside the tractor's machinery. The diagnostic software had been useless, throwing error codes that contradicted each other. The engine timing was off by 7 degrees, which should have been impossible with a computer-controlled system. The transmission fluid was clean, but smelled wrong, with a faint chemical undertone that didn't match any contamination she had encountered before. The electrical system read proper voltage at the battery, but showed drops across random components with no consistent pattern. She had stripped the engine down to the block, checking every sensor, every connection, every gasket. She had pulled the transmission and found the clutch packs worn but functional. She had traced every wire in the electrical system with a multimeter, mapping the entire circuit by hand because the wiring diagrams in the service manual didn't match the actual installation. By Friday of the first week, she had found and fixed 14 separate problems. None of them had been the problem. "How's it going?" Robert appeared in the doorway of the shed around noon, immaculate in pressed khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than Maya's weekly grocery budget. He had been doing this every few days, stopping by to check on her progress with the casual interest of someone watching an experiment. Maya didn't look up from the fuel injector she was testing. Making progress. "Ah, that's what you said on Tuesday." He walked closer, peering at the disassembled engine components spread across the workbench like organs from an autopsy. "Looks like you're taking the whole thing apart. That's what it needs. The harvest is moving fast. 2 weeks left, maybe less if the weather holds. Robert picked up a fuel line fitting, examined it, set it down. You know, I have a replacement tractor coming on Monday, leased from Deere, top of the line. Costs me $18,000 a month, but at least it works. Maya finally looked at him. He was smiling, but there was something else in his eyes. Not quite cruelty, but a kind of satisfied curiosity, like a scientist observing a rat in a maze. I'll have this one running before then, she said. Will you? He tilted his head. You know what I think, Maya. I think you're extremely intelligent and probably very good at your job, but I also think you're in over your head here. There's no shame in admitting it. I'm not admitting anything. Pride. Robert shook his head slowly. It's what got you here in the first place, isn't it? All those credentials, that confidence. Thinking you could just walk onto my farm and show everyone how it's done. But this isn't a classroom, and it's not some assembly line in Detroit. This is the real world, and sometimes the real world wins. Maya set down the injector with more force than necessary. Is there something you actually need, or did you just come by to give me career advice? His smile widened. Just checking in. I'm rooting for you, you know. I genuinely hope you succeed, but I'm also a businessman, and I plan for outcomes. He started walking toward the door, then paused. Oh, I meant to tell you, there's a company dinner tomorrow night at the main house. 6 p.m. Jacket required. You should come. The crew appreciates it when management makes an effort. I have work to do. It wasn't optional. His voice didn't change tone, but something in it hardened. 6 p.m. Don't be late. After he left, Maya stood motionless for a long moment, staring at the disassembled engine. Then she picked up a wrench and threw it as hard as she could at the far wall. It hit with a satisfying crash and clattered to the concrete floor. She immediately felt foolish. She was exhausted. Running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee, and letting him get to her, was exactly what he wanted. She retrieved the wrench, checked it for damage, and went back to work. That night, lying in her narrow bed above the machinery office, Maya couldn't sleep. Her mind kept cycling through the diagnostic data, trying to see the pattern she knew had to be there. Complex systems always had patterns. You just had to find the right perspective. She pulled out her laptop and started reviewing the documentation again, page by page, line by line. At 2 a.m., drinking her 5th cup of coffee, she noticed something. The tractor's serial number was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just off by a few digits from what was registered in the Deere database. It could have been a data entry error, but it could also mean something else. Maya opened a new browser tab and started searching. 20 minutes later, she leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. The tractor had been reported stolen 18 months ago from a dealership in Nebraska. The report had been withdrawn 3 weeks later with a note that said, "Resolved through private settlement." The serial number had been changed, probably professionally, which explained the slight discrepancy. She sat in the darkness of her small apartment, feeling the pieces rearrange themselves into a new configuration. Robert had bought a stolen tractor at auction. That meant it had probably been stripped for parts, possibly damaged deliberately, and definitely tampered with in ways that would make it nearly impossible to repair using normal methods. This wasn't a test of her mechanical skills. It was a setup designed to be unsolvable. Maya closed the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the farmland stretched away into blackness, broken only by the lights of the main house on the hill. She could see windows glowing warm and golden, shadows moving behind curtains. Robert's world, comfortable and certain, built on the backs of people like her. She thought about calling Sarah, but it was too late, and her sister needed sleep more than conversation. She thought about packing her things and leaving before morning, just disappearing and letting Robert win by default. She thought about all the reasons this wasn't worth it. Then she thought about the expression on his face when he had said, on paper, and something in her chest tightened into resolve. If this was a setup, she would find the evidence, and if there was no way to win by his rules, she would change the rules. The company dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as Maya had anticipated. 20 people gathered in Robert's dining room, a space that could have housed her entire apartment 3 times over. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of horses, a table that looked like it belonged in a European castle. The other employees were there, operations managers, the head of grain storage, the accountant, several senior foremen, all of them dressed in their best clothes and speaking in careful voices. Maya had put on the only jacket she owned, a black blazer she used for job interviews, with clean jeans because she didn't own dress pants. She felt out of place in a way that went beyond clothing. Robert played host with effortless charm, moving from conversation to conversation, making jokes that everyone laughed at a half-second too quickly. His wife was there, a thin woman named Elizabeth, who smiled constantly and said almost nothing. Their son, Marcus, was visiting from Chicago where he worked in finance. He had his father's looks and a habit of talking about money as if it were a sport. "So you're the one trying to fix the ghost tractor," Marcus said to Maya during the appetizer course. He had positioned himself across from her at the table, either by chance or design. "Dad told me about your challenge. Brutal." "It's going fine," Maya said, cutting her steak into precise pieces. "Is it?" Marcus leaned back, swirling wine in his glass. "Because I heard you've been tearing it down to the frame and still haven't figured it out. No offense, but that doesn't sound like fine to me." "Engineering takes time." "Sure, but you're on a deadline, right? 3 weeks?" He glanced at his father, who was talking to the accountant 2 seats down, but clearly listening. "That's the thing about farming. Timing is everything. Miss your window and the whole year is shot." Maya set down her fork. "I'll make the deadline." "I hope so, for your sake." Marcus smiled, but it was his father's smile, the one that didn't touch the eyes. "Dad doesn't usually offer second chances. He doesn't need to. There's always someone else willing to take the job." Across the table, one of the foremen, a man named Carlos, who had been kind to Maya during her first week, shifted uncomfortably. "The tractor's been a problem for everyone," he said quietly. "It's not a fair test." "Fair?" Marcus laughed. "This is business, Carlos. Fair doesn't enter into it. Results matter. Dad pays top dollar and he expects top performance. If Maya can't deliver, she's not right for the job. Simple as that." Maya felt everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see how she would react. She picked up her water glass and took a slow sip, buying time to control her voice. When she spoke, she looked directly at Robert. "The tractor was stolen," she said into the sudden silence. "The serial number was altered. That's why it has problems. It was tampered with, probably stripped for parts and reassembled with components that don't belong together. You can't fix it properly because it's not properly broken. It's Frankenstein equipment." The room went completely quiet. Robert stopped mid-conversation and turned to look at her. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture shifted. "That's quite an accusation," he said softly. "It's not an accusation, it's a fact. The serial number is wrong, and the theft report is in the Nebraska State Police database. You either knew when you bought it, or you bought it from someone who didn't tell you the truth." Marcus started to say something, but Robert held up one hand. He set down his napkin with deliberate care, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "Everyone leave," he said quietly, "except Maya." The room emptied in under 30 seconds, people filing out with averted eyes and hurried movements. Even Elizabeth disappeared without a word, closing the door behind her. Maya found herself alone with Robert Bridgewater in his dining room, the remains of dinner still spread across the table between them. Robert stood and walked to the windows that overlooked his empire. He was silent for so long that Maya wondered if he was going to speak at all. "You're right," he finally said. I knew. Not when I bought it, I'm not that stupid, but I figured it out about 3 months ago when I started getting strange inquiries from insurance investigators. He turned to face her. You know what the problem was? I paid cash at auction. $220,000. I can't get that back, and I can't sell it without someone asking questions. So it sits in my shed, useless. Why not just report it properly? Because then I'd be admitting I bought stolen property, and that would raise questions about everything else I've purchased. My accountant would have a heart attack. The IRS might take an interest. It's easier to let it rot. He walked back to the table, standing opposite her. But you weren't supposed to figure that out. You were just supposed to fail. Quietly, and I would let you go and find someone else. Maya felt cold. The whole challenge was fake. Not fake. Impossible. Which is different. Robert sat down again, pouring himself more wine. I needed to know if you were actually good or just educated. Now I know you're very good. You're also very inconvenient, because now you know something I'd prefer stayed buried. I could tell people. You could. But who would believe you, a desperate woman with a sick sister, facing termination, making wild accusations against a respected business owner? He sipped his wine. Or you could keep quiet, finish your 3 weeks working on whatever you want in that shed, and then accept a very generous severance package, say 6 months' salary. That should help with your sister's medical bills. The offer hung between them like a bribe and a threat. Maya could feel the walls closing in, the same trapped sensation she had felt the day he issued the challenge. Every path led to the same place. Her silence bought with money she desperately needed. What if I fix it anyway? She asked. Robert actually laughed. With mismatched parts and a corrupted computer system, you have 10 days left, Maya. It took me months to accept it was impossible. You're brilliant, but you're not a miracle worker. Then you won't mind if I try. Something flickered across his face. Curiosity, maybe, or admiration. No, I won't mind. Waste your time if you want. But the offer expires when your deadline does. After that, you leave with nothing but your paycheck and a note on your employment record that I can phrase however I choose. Maya stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she kept her voice even. I'd like to go now. Of course. Robert gestured toward the door. Think about what I said. There's no shame in accepting reality. She walked out without responding, through the vast house and into the cold October night. The walk back to her apartment took 15 minutes, and with every step she felt the weight of what she had learned settling onto her shoulders. In her apartment, she called Sarah. It rang 4 times before her sister answered, voice fuzzy with sleep and medication. Maya, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I wanted to hear your voice. It's midnight. I know, I'm sorry. There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was clearer, more alert. What happened? Maya told her. All of it. The challenge, the stolen tractor, Robert's offer. Sarah listened in silence until she finished. Take the money, Sarah said immediately. 6 months' salary? Maya, that's $40,000. We need that. I know. Then why do you sound like you're thinking about doing something stupid? Because he bought my silence. He's counting on me needing money more than I need self-respect. Self-respect doesn't pay for chemotherapy. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. I love you, and I know you want to fight him. But I need you more than I need you to be a hero. Please, just take the money and come home. Maya closed her eyes. Okay. Promise me. I promise. After she hung up, Maya sat in the darkness for a long time. Then she stood up, pulled on her work boots, and walked back to the machine shed. If she only had 10 days left, she was going to spend them working. Because that was all she knew how to do. The tractor waited in the shadows, silent and broken, a puzzle with no solution. Or maybe, Maya thought as she turned on the lights and rolled up her sleeves, it just needed someone willing to tear everything down to find the truth underneath. By the middle of the second week, Maya had become a ghost haunting her own life. She ate when she remembered, slept in 3-hour intervals on the couch in the machinery office, and existed in a fog of diagnostic manuals and hydraulic schematics. The tractor had become more than a machine. It was a mystery written in metal and electricity, a code she was determined to crack even as the deadline crept closer. The other workers had started avoiding her. She overheard them talking sometimes, their voices carrying across the autumn fields during shift changes. La ingeniera loca, they called her, the crazy engineer. She didn't care. She had stopped caring about most things that weren't directly related to fuel pressure curves and electrical load balancing. On Wednesday morning, with exactly 7 days remaining, Maya made a breakthrough. She had been mapping the electrical system for the 3rd time, checking every ground point with a precision multimeter, when she noticed that one of the main chassis ground connections showed intermittent resistance. It was hidden behind the fuel tank, nearly impossible to reach without removing half the tractor's subframe, which explained why everyone else had missed it. She spent 16 straight hours disassembling the necessary components. When she finally exposed the ground point, she found the problem. Someone had deliberately inserted a degraded washer, corroded metal that looked normal but created electrical resistance. It was sabotage, subtle and professional, designed to create random faults throughout the system. Maya sat back on her heels, staring at the corroded washer in her grease-stained hand, and started laughing. It was a slightly unhinged sound that echoed in the empty shed. This wasn't just a stolen tractor. Someone had sabotaged it specifically to make it undiagnosable, which meant Robert hadn't just bought stolen property, he had bought a trap meant for someone else. She worked through the night, finding 3 more sabotaged connection points. Each one was different, but served the same purpose, creating cascading failures that would confound anyone trying to repair the machine systematically. By Thursday morning, she had removed all of them and replaced them with proper components. When she turned the key, the engine started smoothly. No stuttering, no rough idle, just the clean, powerful hum of a $500,000 machine running the way it was designed to. Maya sat in the cab, hands trembling on the steering wheel, and felt something break open in her chest. Relief, mixed with exhaustion, mixed with a triumph so fierce it left her breathless. Then she noticed the transmission warning light was still on. 2 hours of testing revealed the truth. The transmission itself was damaged, probably deliberately, and would need a complete rebuild or replacement. Parts cost alone would be $30,000, and the repair would take at least 4 days, maybe longer. She had 6 days until the deadline. It was still impossible. Maya climbed down from the cab and walked outside into the weak October sunlight. The farm stretched around her in shades of brown and gold. The fields mostly harvested now, a few combines still working the far sections. She could see workers loading grain trucks, the complex choreography of industrial agriculture moving forward with or without her participation. Her phone rang. Sarah's doctor. "Ms. Reeves, I wanted to update you on your sister's latest scans. The tumors have responded well to treatment, but we're seeing some new growth in the lymphatic system. We'd like to begin a more aggressive protocol, but insurance is declining to cover it. The cost would be approximately $90,000 out of pocket over the next 6 months. Maya closed her eyes. How long does she have without it? That's difficult to say, maybe a year, maybe less. And with the treatment? Survival rates are promising. 70% make it 5 years or more. After the call ended, Maya walked back into the shed. She stood in front of the tractor for a long time, looking at this stupid machine that had consumed 2 weeks of her life, this impossible challenge that had been designed to break her from the start. Then she called Robert Bridgewater. He answered on the second ring. "Maya, how's the project?" "I found the sabotage," she said without preamble. "The electrical grounds were tampered with, along with several other systems. Someone booby-trapped this tractor deliberately. You didn't just buy stolen equipment, you bought something that was meant to destroy whoever tried to fix it." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's a serious claim. I have the components. I can prove it." Maya kept her voice level. "The question is, who did you buy this from?" "A private seller at an estate auction in Council Bluffs. I never met him directly. Everything went through an auction house." Robert's voice had gone careful. "You're saying this was intentional?" "Yes. And whoever did it probably has a grudge against either you or the person they thought would end up with the tractor, maybe a competitor, maybe someone you've hurt in business. But this was personal." Another long pause. "Can you fix it?" "The electrical issues, yes, I already did. But the transmission is damaged, and I don't have enough time or budget to repair it properly before the deadline." "What do you need?" Maya almost laughed at how quickly he shifted from adversary to ally when his own interests were at stake. "A replacement transmission, which takes 4 days to ship and another 2 to install. I'd need an extension on the deadline." "Done. Fix the tractor, Maya. Prove this was sabotage, and I'll triple your bonus. $75,000. She should have said yes immediately. $75,000 plus 6 months' salary would cover Sarah's treatment with money left over. It was everything she needed. Instead, she said, "I want something else." "Name it." "When I fix this, I want a statement from you about what happened. Written documentation that this machine was sabotaged, that you purchased it unknowingly, and that I'm the one who discovered and corrected the problems. I want a reference letter that says exactly how good I am at my job. And I want you to fund a scholarship at Iowa State for women studying agricultural engineering. $100,000. The silence stretched so long, she thought he might have hung up. "You're negotiating?" Robert finally said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. "You're in no position to negotiate, Maya. Neither are you. If this tractor was sabotaged, that means someone is targeting you. You need to know who and why, and I'm the only one who can give you that information. So yes, I'm negotiating." She could almost hear him thinking, calculating, weighing outcomes. $75,000, he said slowly. "The documentation you requested, and $50,000 for the scholarship. That's my final offer. $75,000, the documentation, and $80,000 for the scholarship. Non-negotiable." "You're going to turn down money that your sister needs for a scholarship fund? Sarah told me to take your original bribe and come home. She told me to stop fighting and just survive. And you know what? She's right about a lot of things, but not this. Because if I take your money and walk away, nothing changes. You'll keep testing people until they break, and someone else will end up in the same position I'm in, and it'll keep happening forever. But if I do this, if I actually win on terms I set, then maybe one other woman gets a chance she wouldn't have had." Maya took a breath. "So that's the deal. Take it or leave it." Robert laughed, a genuine sound this time. "You're either the smartest person I've met, or the most foolish. I can't decide which." Another pause. "Done. Fix the tractor, prove sabotage, and you get everything you asked for. But Maya, if you fail, you leave with nothing. No bonus, no severance, no reference, nothing. Those are my terms." "Fair enough." After she hung up, Maya realized her hands were shaking. She had just gambled Sarah's treatment money on her own ability to finish an impossible repair in 6 days. If she failed, they would both pay the price. But if she succeeded... She pushed the thought away and got to work. The transmission arrived Friday morning, delivered by semi-truck. Maya had already disassembled the old unit, mapping every connection and mounting point, photographing everything so reassembly would be straightforward. The new transmission weighed nearly 1,000 pounds, and installing it required a hydraulic lift and precision that left no room for mistakes. She worked through Friday night and into Saturday, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. Carlos, the foreman who had spoken up at the dinner, stopped by around midnight with food from his wife, homemade tamales and rice. "You should eat," he said, setting the containers on her workbench. "Can't work if you collapse." Maya looked up from the torque wrench she was calibrating. "Thank you." He hesitated, then said, "Everyone knows about the challenge. Robert told the management team. Most of them think you'll fail." "What do you think?" Carlos shrugged. "I think you're loco for trying. But I also think if anyone can do it, it's you. My daughter wants to be an engineer. She's watching what you're doing. So thank you for that." After he left, Maya ate the tamales slowly, tasting them properly for the first time in days. They were good, complex, rich, made with care. She thought about Carlos's daughter, watching from whatever distance, seeing a woman refuse to break. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like gravity. Sunday morning, with 4 days left, the transmission was installed. Maya connected all the hydraulics, the electronics, the mechanical linkages. She triple-checked every connection, every torque specification, every calibration point. At noon, she started the engine and engaged the transmission for the first time. It slipped. The gears caught, released, caught again. Something was still wrong. Maya shut down the engine and sat very still in the cab, feeling the edges of panic creeping in. She had 72 hours left. If the transmission was faulty, if she had misinstalled something, if there was another point of sabotage she hadn't found, she forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic wouldn't help. She needed to think, to diagnose, to trace the problem back to its source. She spent the next 6 hours testing every component in the transmission system. The fluid was clean, the pressure was correct, the electronic controls responded properly. Everything should work. But it didn't. At dusk, she finally found it. One of the hydraulic servos had a reversed polarity connection. Someone had deliberately wired it backward, probably during the original sabotage, and she had reinstalled it the same way when she rebuilt the transmission mounting. It was the kind of error that would cause exactly the symptoms she was seeing. Maya fixed it in 20 minutes. When she tested the transmission again, it worked perfectly. Smooth, precise, powerful. The tractor was fixed. She sat in the cab as darkness fell, watching the dashboard lights glow green and stable, listening to the engine purr. She had done it. She had actually done it. Then her phone rang. "Maya?" Sarah's voice was weak, distant. "I'm in the hospital. Something's wrong. The doctors say," her voice broke, "they say I need to start the aggressive treatment now, not in a week or a month, now or—" "I'm coming," Maya said immediately. "I'm leaving right now. But your deadline doesn't matter. I'm coming." She shut down the tractor, grabbed her keys and ran for her truck. The drive to Des Moines would take 3 hours. The deadline was in 72 hours. She could drive there, see Sarah, make sure she was stable, and drive back in time to meet Robert's terms. Or she could stay with her sister, who needed her more than any job or challenge or scholarship fund. Maya reached her truck and stopped with her hand on the door handle. In her other hand, her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "The parts supplier confirmed the sabotage. Found the seller's connection to a competitor. Well done. I'll have the documentation ready by Tuesday." Tuesday. The deadline. She stood in the cold October night, torn between two impossible choices, and felt the weight of everything she had fought for, pressing down like physical force. Then she got in the truck and started driving toward Des Moines, leaving the fixed tractor and her chance at victory behind, because some things mattered more than winning, even if it meant losing everything else. Maya reached the hospital at 1:30 a.m., driving through rain that had started an hour outside Des Moines, and turned the highway into a blur of brake lights and darkness. She parked illegally in the emergency zone and ran inside, still wearing her grease-stained work clothes, her hands shaking from 3 hours of white-knuckle driving. Sarah was in ICU, septic shock from an infection at the chemotherapy port site. Her fever had spiked to 103, and her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. The nurse who finally let Maya through the locked doors spoke in careful, clinical terms about antibiotics and fluid replacement and the next critical hours. Sarah looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hissed, her skin grey under the harsh fluorescent lights. But she was awake, and when she saw Maya, she tried to smile. "You're supposed to be fixing that tractor," she whispered. Maya pulled a chair close and took her sister's hand. It felt hot and dry, like paper about to catch fire. "The tractor's fixed. I'm right where I need to be." Liar. Sarah closed her eyes. "Your deadline is Tuesday. It's Monday morning. You should have stayed. We can talk about this later." "No." Sarah's eyes opened again, fierce despite the exhaustion. "Listen to me. I love you. You're the best person I know. But you can't save me by giving up everything you've worked for. That doesn't help anyone. Sarah, I'm going to be fine. The doctors said the antibiotics are working. My fever's already down 2 degrees. She squeezed Maya's hand weakly. "But if you miss that deadline, if you throw away your shot at proving yourself, I won't forgive you. Do you understand?" Maya felt tears burning in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Sarah's voice was getting drowsy as the medication pulled her back under. "You're going to sit here for 2 hours while I sleep, so you know I'm okay. Then you're going to drive back to that farm and meet your deadline. Promise me." "I can't promise me." Maya sat in silence, watching her sister's chest rise and fall with the rhythm of the respirator, listening to the electronic symphony of medical equipment. She thought about all the times Sarah had been the strong one, when their parents died, when Maya was struggling through graduate school, when the diagnosis first came, and Sarah had comforted Maya instead of the other way around. "Okay," she finally whispered. "I promise." Sarah smiled without opening her eyes. "Knew you were smart." Maya stayed for 3 hours until Sarah's fever had dropped to 100. 3, and the doctor assured her the worst was past. Then she drove back through the rain, arriving at Bridgewater Farms at 8 a.m. Monday morning with exactly 30 hours until the deadline. She went straight to the machine shed. The tractor sat where she had left it, fully assembled and functional. But functional wasn't enough. Robert wanted proof of sabotage, documentation, a report that would stand up to scrutiny. Maya spent Monday compiling everything, photographs of each sabotaged component, detailed notes on where she found them and what they had been designed to do, comparison specs showing how the parts differed from factory standards. She wrote a 20-page technical report documenting the entire investigation, complete with timelines, evidence chains, and conclusions. At 4 p.m., Carlos found her in the machinery office, surrounded by printed documents and technical drawings. "You should rest," he said. "You look like death." "Can't. Deadline is tomorrow at noon. The tractor runs. I saw you test it last week. Running isn't enough. I need to prove it was sabotage." Maya rubbed her eyes. "Robert needs documentation he can use to go after whoever did this. If I can't provide that, the deal falls through." Carlos was quiet for a moment, then he said, "My daughter asked me to give you something." He pulled out a folded piece of paper and set it on her desk. "She wanted you to know." After he left, Maya unfolded the paper. It was a drawing in colored pencil, a woman in work clothes standing next to a tractor, with the words, "Thank you for not quitting," written in careful letters across the top. Maya stared at it for a long time. Then she carefully pinned it to the wall above her desk and got back to work. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold. Maya finished the report at 9 a.m., printed 3 copies, and bound them in professional folders. She conducted one final test of the tractor, filming everything with her phone to document that all systems were functioning properly. At 11:30, she drove it out of the machine shed and across the farm to Robert's office. He was waiting outside, along with Marcus and 2 people Maya didn't recognize, a woman in a business suit and a man with a camera. "Maya Reeves," Robert said as she climbed down from the cab, "I'd like you to meet Jessica Ward from Farm Equipment Weekly and her photographer. I thought you might like some witnesses for this moment." Maya felt ambushed. "I thought this was between us." "It was, until I realized what you actually accomplished here." Robert's expression was different than she had ever seen it, not quite respect, but close. "You didn't just fix a tractor, you uncovered a conspiracy. Turns out the person who sabotaged this machine has done it before, to 3 other farms in the region. The FBI is investigating. You've potentially stopped a serial saboteur." The journalist stepped forward with a recorder. "Ms. Reeves, how did you identify the sabotage when 3 other mechanics couldn't?" Maya looked at Robert. He nodded encouragingly. She suddenly understood what was happening. He was turning her success into his success, claiming the credit for hiring someone smart enough to crack the case. It was manipulation, pure and simple, a way to control the narrative. She could play along. It would be easy, or she could tell the truth. "I identified it," Maya said slowly, "because I was angry enough to not give up. Mr. Bridgewater hired me under false pretenses, gave me an impossible task designed to make me fail, and offered me money to walk away when I started asking uncomfortable questions. I stayed because I was too stubborn to let him win." The journalist's eyebrows rose. She glanced at Robert, whose smile had frozen. Marcus stepped forward. "My father made you an extremely generous offer." "Your father," Maya interrupted, "is a bully who uses money to control people. He's also smart enough to recognize talent when he sees it, even if he can't help testing people until they break." She looked at Robert directly. "But I didn't break. I fixed your impossible tractor, I documented the sabotage, and I did it on your timeline. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to honor every term of our agreement. The money, the documentation, the scholarship, all of it. And you're going to tell this journalist the actual story, that you gambled on a desperate woman who turned out to be better than you expected." The silence that followed was absolute. The photographer had his camera raised, but seemed afraid to click the shutter. Jessica Ward was writing frantically in her notebook. Marcus looked like he wanted to vanish. Robert stared at Maya for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he started laughing. "You're going to cost me a fortune in PR cleanup," he said. "But you're right. About all of it." He turned to the journalist. "Print that. Print everything she said. I hired Maya Reeves with the intention of proving she wasn't as good as her credentials suggested. Instead, she proved I'm not as clever as I thought I was." He extended his hand. "Deal's done. Every term exactly as negotiated. And Ms. Reeves, you're fired." Maya blinked. "What?" "You're fired," Robert repeated, still smiling, "because the job I hired you for was beneath your qualifications. But I have a better offer, chief engineer for Bridgewater Agricultural Holdings. You'd oversee equipment operations across all my properties. Salary of $140,000, full benefits, housing allowance. I need someone who won't take my bullshit and has the skills to back it up. Interested?" Maya looked at the tractor, then at the people gathered around, then back at Robert. She thought about Sarah in the hospital, about Carlos's daughter, about the scholarship fund that would help other women avoid the trap she had barely escaped. 160,000, she said, and I want Carlos promoted to equipment supervisor with a 20% raise. Robert's smile widened. Done. They shook hands, and the photographer's camera finally clicked. 3 months later, Maya stood in the Iowa State University Engineering building, watching 20 young women fill out scholarship applications. The Bridgewater Women in Agricultural Engineering Scholarship Fund had officially launched with a ceremony that morning. Robert had attended and given a speech that was surprisingly humble. He had even admitted publicly that Maya had forced him to reconsider his assumptions about who belonged in his industry. Sarah was there too, her hair growing back in soft curls, her color better than it had been in a year. The aggressive treatment was working. The prognosis was good. You're famous, Sarah said, linking her arm through Maya's. Farm Equipment Weekly, Progressive Farmer, even NPR did a story. The woman who fixed the unfixable tractor. It was never unfixable, Maya said, just deliberately broken. There's a difference. Still makes a good story. Sarah watched the students filling out forms. These girls are going to get opportunities because of what you did. That matters. Maya thought about the 2 weeks she had spent in that machine shed, convinced she was going to fail, trapped by circumstances and money and the cold calculations of men who saw people as resources to be tested and discarded. She thought about the moment she had chosen to drive to Des Moines instead of meeting the deadline, and how that choice had somehow not destroyed her after all. I'm going to tell them the truth, Maya said. When I talk to them as part of the scholarship program, I'm not going to pretend it was easy or fair or that talent alone is enough. I'm going to tell them it's going to be harder for them than it is for men, that they'll be tested in ways that aren't reasonable, and that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play by rules designed to make you lose. Heavy stuff for a scholarship lunch. Yeah, Maya smiled. But they can handle it. They're engineers. Outside, the Iowa winter was settling in, snow dusting the campus paths and the wind carrying the smell of cold earth and distant fields waiting for spring. The tractor that had started everything sat in a climate-controlled section of Bridgewater's equipment warehouse, fully restored now, a museum piece documenting the day someone fought the system and won, or at least survived, which was sometimes the same thing. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Carlos. Problem with the grain dryer at Site 3. Possible electrical fault. Need your eyes on it. She texted back, on my way. Sarah looked at her phone. You're not going to finish the ceremony? You'll take notes for me. Maya grabbed her coat and keys. Someone needs to fix the grain dryer. Some things never change. No, Maya agreed, heading for the door, but some things do, and that makes all the difference. She walked out into the cold Iowa afternoon toward the truck that would take her to the next problem, the next challenge, the next machine that needed understanding. Behind her, in the warm building filled with young women who didn't yet know how hard the fight would be, the scholarship ceremony continued without her. But they had her story now. They had proof that impossible was sometimes just another word for difficult. They had evidence that the system could be changed, one stubborn repair at a time. And in the end, Maya thought as she drove through the snow toward another farm and another broken machine, that was probably enough. Not victory exactly, but something close to it. Something earned rather than given. Something that would last.